Hello, I'm Corey Strumman. Welcome to the Rochester Rising Podcast, where we amplify the stories of entrepreneurs in Rochester, Minnesota. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today to learn more about small business and the culture of entrepreneurship in Rochester. We hope that you learned something today from a local entrepreneur that can help you with your own journey. Rochester Rising is part of Collider, a Rochester-based nonprofit that activates, connects, and empowers early-stage entrepreneurs in our community. You can learn more about Collider and how our organization can help accelerate and assist your entrepreneurial journey at collider.mn. We release a podcast episode the second Wednesday of each month here at Rochester Rising, which you can find on the Collider website or wherever you best like to listen to your podcasts, including on YouTube. We also have many articles and videos that we have created over the years telling the stories of both new and very experienced business owners. You can find all of that content on our website. We launched Rochester Rising in 2016 to tell stories of entrepreneurship taking place within the city of Rochester, especially stories that otherwise would not have been told, and to take the time to understand each entrepreneur and what their experience has been like in this community. If you find value in this podcast, please consider donating, if you can, to our tip jar so that we can keep telling these stories for the community. We use the local business For Giving for our fundraising efforts. You can find more information about our tip jar and how to donate through For Giving in our show notes. We are on our 253rd episode, and today we will chat with local business owner William Forsman, who shares ownership of one of Rochester's favorite coffee shops, Cafe Steam, as well as their sister company and coffee roastery, Colorway Coffee. Thank you for being here today.
I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, before we jump into the business side of things, tell me a little bit about you. What are your interests and hobbies outside of Cafe Steam and Colorway?
So, full description, my name is Will Forsman. I am co-owner of Cafe Steam as well as our sister company, Colorway Coffee Roasters. In addition to coffee, consuming most of my life, I also do some photography, combination editorial, working with the Med City Beat on some of their partnered content and any sort of breaking news that I'm able to schedule myself for. And then just different side gigs and grad parties and, well, I shouldn't say grad parties, graduation photos, headshots, you name it. But the primary is Cafe Steam. On the side, outside of that capacity, I enjoy fishing and spending some time outdoors, namely fly fishing as a passion or hobby that I picked up in the last 5 or 6 years that is just a great way to get away from the city and kind of spend more time out in nature.
Awesome. So what brought you into working within Rochester and what keeps you here?
Yeah. So I'm originally from Eyota, Minnesota, so that's only about 12 miles east of here. Rochester has always been kind of the big city. Our town is, relative to Rochester, very small. I think only at the time it was a couple thousand people. My graduating class was very small. I think in total we had 45 people graduating at the same time. Now, I think there was a little bit of differentiation between those that were doing some PSEO and those who were continuing their education there. But at that point, I went to Fargo to pursue a higher education. Unfortunately, some of my pursuits were were extracurricular, and I think it pulled me away from the actual education component of going to college. And at some point, I realized it was just kind of a waste of my time and my parents' money. And I think at that time, decided to leave school and pursue a career in music. Much like any person with a lot of time on their hands, but I was truly passionate about performing music. I drumming in a local 2-piece blues rock band, and we toured throughout Minnesota and the Midwest. And my guitarist had a solo acoustic sets that he would do at the coffee shop that existed prior to Cafe Steam called Press. And I just thought it was the coolest spot. This place that was welcoming of arts and seemed to be the center of the city, and where all the cool people hung out. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to get a job there? So I asked the owner at the time, and yes, they were hiring, but they only had a position open for somebody to wash dishes on like the weekends and whatever hours were available throughout the week. And I think at most I was working 12 or 13 hours a week, so it really wasn't all that much. But I developed a passion for coffee and talking to people, and sort of grew into myself there, and leveled up and was a barista. And then in that transition from press to cafe steam, was able to move into a management position and then eventually an ownership position. And from there, we've grown the company to 3 locations in downtown Rochester. And at the beginning of last year, purchased a company to roast coffee and distribute for each of our locations, and then pick up some wholesale partners in Rochester under the name Colorway Coffee Roasters. And so that's been kind of the new side project, and it's been really cool to see it grow and change with the people that come into our lives, I guess, by extension.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you were working at Cafe Steam and functioning within that management role, what attracted you to the idea of becoming an owner? What made it go from, as you've said, a head dishwashing gig to wanting to be an owner of Cafe Steam?
Part of it was having some skin in the game. You wanted to have, I think personally, I wanted a desire for a greater level of responsibility. And the other part was greater influence over some of those decisions that are being made. I think it also helped me gain a level of confidence and trust in myself and my decisions, because it becomes so much more dependent on your decisions as an owner to determine the outcomes of the day, whether it's, making sure drinks are being made on time, whether it's your customer interactions are positive, or your marketing is on point so that you're attracting new customers and keeping your old customers. I think it was just very attractive to me to have that feeling of ownership and that feeling of a level of responsibility. Granted, over time, your stress levels definitely increase. Your fiscal exposure increases. It's definitely a higher risk, but I didn't really consider those as negatives, because I knew it all. That's kind of what came with the territory that I was entering into. So it just overall was very optimistic about. I knew what I was doing. I was confident in what I knew and how to change things in such a way that it would benefit the business overall.
As you were making all of those transitions from being an employee to being an owner, what were some of the biggest challenges for you in your personal growth and in taking on all of those new responsibilities?
Personal growth-wise, I think just trusting myself and others. In the corporate world, there is the concept of promoting to a level of incompetency. So eventually somebody gets to a point where they don't know all the answers. And I kind of felt myself growing to that level of eventually, I was going to get to the point where I was incompetent and not able to manage every part of the business or know the answer to every problem. So trusting in management of each location, outsourcing some of the financial legwork of accounting and so on, incredibly helpful. But making sure that I was in a position to where I was the most helpful and not actually a detriment to the business, and wasn't actually what was holding the business back. Outside of that, I think just accepting that every day you're going to have to learn something new, or be willing to learn new things to accommodate for the needs of the business. If you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, we're often most confident about a new skill right when we have it. And over time, as you learn to develop that skill, your confidence slowly kind of goes down. And there's a point at which your confidence level starts to go up, but it's only after you've gained what would be called, regarded as an acceptable level, skill level. So we're often least confident about what we're doing when we're actually in a position to where we know what we're talking about. And so trying to build my confidence back up to say, you don't have some sort of imposter syndrome. I mean, it's not common for a 28-year-old to be, well, and even, when I'd started 7 years ago, it's uncommon for a person of my age to be in that position. And a lot of it was luck. A lot of it was just seizing the opportunity to be involved. But that's another component of it, just kind of at large, to be able to find my confidence and trust my decisions and trust people around me.
Yeah, in that process, you definitely ended up teaching yourself a lot of things. I think people would definitely say that you're self-made and self-taught in a lot of aspects of life. What would you say is a running list of skills that you've acquired over the last 7 years?
That is a great question. And unfortunately, I think part of the trauma of owning a business, you block out a lot of the things that you've had to learn by extension. But I mean, it includes plumbing. It includes, gutting espresso machines and reassembling them, electrical, learning how to do photography. That this was actually the whole reason I got into photography was because I wasn't happy with our social media, and so I got a real starter DSLR camera about 7 years ago. 7 years ago, and started playing around with taking photos and develop that skill to a point where I was able to make it into its own side business. Taxes and licensure, working with the city, working with the county, developing those contacts. But this is not all stuff that you learn overnight. It's something that happens after years and years of doing these things and doing them every single day. There is no hyperbole to the saying that small business owners really don't take a day off, but they're doing something that they're so passionate about that it doesn't really feel like work. Comparing it to an office environment where you clock in and you clock out, and you're performing your tasks during that time, small business owners aren't necessarily afforded in that same fashion, because at any moment, from 6:30 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night, I could get that phone call where suddenly I've got to change my plans around to accommodate for the needs of the business. Other skills, a little carpentry, sure. There's some labor-intensive skills.
Some graphic design too, right?
Graphic design, yeah. So I definitely sort of learned a lot about graphic design, but I think I got myself to a point where I learned that I was not very good at it. So that was another one of those promoting myself to a level of incompetency where I realized what I wanted was beyond my skill set, and so outsourcing a lot of that. So we work with local groups like Tree Dome and Maggie Panetta in specific, who does some incredible graphic design for us, and that has been incredibly useful because it takes time that I otherwise would have dedicated to learning something that I really would have taken a lot longer to learn, and consolidated it to somebody who really knows what they're doing and can take what we need and adapt it to their own skill set and produce something that is incredibly helpful to the business.
Wonderful. Based on my perception, Colorway Coffee was purchased and launched during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. First of all, where did that brainchild come from? Where did the idea come from? And also, what were some of the challenges with starting a new business during a pandemic?
The thought had always been in our minds to go into roasting. I think it is responsible of a business to vertically integrate as much as they can, to be in control of the means of production and your supply is important, not only to widen the margin associated with each sale, but it also gives you more control over the quality of the product that you're producing. So through roasting, we were able to determine the types of coffee we were serving, keep quality assurance high, and do so in such a way that fit the needs of each of the locations. The opportunity came up at the very end of 2020. I got a phone call from Chris Williams, who owned narrow road coffee roasters. He said he had some equipment that he was hoping to sell, and came to take a look at it, saw that there was a whole roastery there. And I was like, kind of the thought came to me that this is sort of the perfect setup for us. Everything that was there was, or everything that we needed was there. And it made sense. And it was one of those things where it just clicked, and it started to, and it was like, this would be the perfect setup for us. So it talked as an ownership group, decided, yes, this is something that we wanted to pursue. And we're able to come to an agreement with the purchase of that business. One of the tough parts is another thing that I had to learn, which was how to roast coffee. I'd always done so on a very small scale in a little stovetop roaster, and which roasting like a pound at a time. But now you're taking and scaling it up to doing not just a pound at a time, but doing upwards of 15 pounds at a time, and not just 15 pounds in a batch, but you're doing 250 pounds to 300 pounds a week. So doing so that it would produce coffee that actually tasted good was a big challenge, because I took everything that I thought I knew and tried to apply it to a larger scale. Didn't necessarily translate, so you end up wasting a lot of coffee, and you needed to find that perfect transitional point where the quality was matched, and ability to say goodbye to your former partnerships with, at the time it was Roastery 7, who was incredibly helpful in that transition. But able to say, all right, we're at a point where we're comfortable separating. Then it came to, stuff that I was familiar with, but you're translating it to a larger entity. So, with regulations going from not just to county public health, but going to larger agencies like the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and the FDA, and trying to meet those guidelines and requirements which are not all that dissimilar from the county requirements. They're just perhaps a little bit trickier because they're more stringent and less forgiving. Other challenges are branding. Creating an identity for a company is often very difficult, because we wanted it to be different from Cafe Steam so that we could reach a larger audience regionally, and that giving it its own voice and giving its own character is really hard, because in your mindset you're familiar with the voice of Cafe Steam, and now we're trying to create a totally different personality to it, and hopefully we're able to accomplish that over time. It does take practice, but and then now it's sales. That's hard. It's hard enough to sell coffee. You kind of have to sell yourself, and that is where real confidence comes in, because you're maybe meeting with people who aren't that interested in buying your coffee, and you have to kind of persuade them, or you have to present reasons for them to want to buy your coffee. And thankfully, it's a product that I'm really excited about, and it's something that I'm super passionate about. And our head roaster, Austin, has an incredible skill set and about 10 years in coffee roasting itself that we're able to draw from, and huge asset finding Austin Power, who had previously worked in coffee in South Carolina, and to be able to use that to our benefit and create an environment where he feels like he's doing work that he's proud of, rather than kind of while working for us, giving more autonomy and the freedom of decisions, that kind of thing. So yeah. I hope that kind of a long-winded answer for...
No, that's all good. So obviously in Cafe Steam, where else can people find Colorway Coffee in town?
Sure. We've got a number of different partnerships. Cafe 49 inside of the Olmsted Medical Center. We are on the shelves at the People's Food Co-op. We are on the shelves at Dwell Local in Zumbrota. We are serving out of Sweet House Bakery. We are on the shelves inside of Flowers by Jerry. And there are some that I'm missing. We do collaboration beers with Little Thistle for the Legend, and they've got another one that they're coming out with here for Bachfest that we're really excited to try.
Awesome.
yeah, and hoping to continue to grow those partnerships, because that's really what is the lifeblood of Colorway Coffee.
Awesome. Well, switching gears a little bit, I know that your position at Steam and Colorway has granted you some very exciting travel opportunities. So what are some of the places you've gone, and have any exciting or scary stories to come from that?
Oh, well, in the hopes, in the event that my mother listens to it, we may only give slightly scary stories, but the opportunities have come up to visit countries of origin. I traveled with a company called Traboco, which is an green coffee importer out of the Netherlands, through both Ethiopia and Kenya. This was at the very end of 2019 and coming into 2020. Ethiopia was an incredible experience, and the purpose. People always ask me, what's the point of going to countries of origin? I think a lot of roasters try to create a story out of it, right? You know, they're going there because they're trying to connect with the green coffee, or the farmer, and build a relationship and so on. At a baseline, it's a tourist opportunity. It's a great opportunity to immerse yourself in a culture and a country that you otherwise would not have. So, on top of that, just really understanding the difficulty in resource acquisition for these farms, and how hard it is for them to get coffee from the point of origin to where it's roasting. It gave me a sense of responsibility to coffee that I think otherwise would not have had, and also expanding my understanding of how smallholder farmers are bringing their coffee to mills, and where, in a lot of people's concepts of coffee, you're thinking of big, massive fields on plantations in Brazil or something like that. But in reality, it's somebody in their backyard is growing coffee, and they pick it, and it is a bycrop that they use to supplement income in otherwise very economically depressed areas. That is incredibly helpful. So any sales that they can make are going directly to those farmers. And so it built on my appreciation for what is incredibly labor intensive compared to how low of a cost we pay for the coffee in general. So, yeah, hoping to do some more traveling. There's whispers of some times being spent in Peru and Colombia, but nothing's really materialized. I anticipate being back in Ethiopia in December, working again with that same importing company, this time in a photography capacity, because they enjoyed some of the photos that I'd taken previously. But it is a dream come true to be able to actually go from just a barista and dreaming about these places and seeing it in magazines, and to actually experience it myself. So very thankful to have been able to do so.
Yeah, definitely a far leap from dishwashing. So can you talk a little bit about the changes and challenges that came with the pandemic, and how the community came around Cafe Steam to support and lift you guys up?
Yeah, much like any business, we encountered the challenges of having to close for a period of time. We did have to. One of the biggest outcomes of it was we did have to close our fourth location that existed inside of Thesis Beer Project, and really cool concept and project that we had worked on with them. But we understood that the timeline for the reopening and accessibility that would be able to sustain it was far beyond what was reasonable for us. So we consolidated all of our the equipment there and distributed it to other locations. But all told, that was probably the biggest hit that we took throughout each of the locations. Just general decrease in foot traffic, harder to reach customers, so you have to adapt and almost bring yourself to customers. So we launched a delivery service where we would run weekly deliveries of bottled drinks. So working with the county on an acceptable way to bottle drinks in a safe way that can be refrigerated, and getting it tested by state laboratories, and jumping through a bunch of hoops to be able to do so. Having to have very difficult conversation with staff to say, suddenly, within by tomorrow you're all without of a job, and trying to then find, some light at the end of the tunnel for yourself, because you're going to be working very long hours by yourself on bar, which was really fun at first because it kind of felt like camping, because you're pretty much living inside of the coffee shop. But realistically, that work is not going to be enough to meet the overall expenses that are incurred by operating 3 locations, 2 of which are not operable. Over time, able to reopen each of the locations, but then you're faced with, well, now people can't sit in. Moving to a to-go model, your margin is much smaller because to-go cups are incredibly expensive, and now you've got supply issues, which also double the cost of any of your ingredients. So coffee, for example, purchasing green coffee at the end of 2020, end of 2021 to now, the price of green coffee has doubled and almost tripled in some cases.
Wow.
And trying to change the perception of how much people should have to pay for a cup of coffee is really difficult. Even today, had to kind of have a conversation with the customer as to why is it that a cup of coffee costs $3? How can it cost $3? I can just get a cup of coffee at Quick Trip for 99 cents. And you say, well, this is different. This is actually buying coffee from people who are able to support at least a marginally smaller, better quality of life. But that doesn't necessarily translate. And just overall supply chain issues, lead times on things. So I used to be able to order printed cups and have them show up in 2 weeks. Now it is 28 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
From the point of ordering. And so
That's
you can imagine floating $12,000 and hoping that cups show up within a reasonable amount of time and not seeing them for 28 weeks. That can be a huge hit on a business that's already more financially exposed than they should be. So it's all about just managing your cortisol levels and stress levels, and just being able to change as change requires.
Absolutely. Well, we've definitely seen that Cafe Steam can be adaptable and make it through and be around for a lot longer.
Yes.
Awesome. What kind of experience are you trying to create at Steam, and what are your core community values?
I'll start with core community values. We sort of model ourselves off after, and full disclosure, you used to be a barista.
I was for so long.
And part of your legacy with Steam is kind of giving us that inspiration story in a clean, well-lighted place, an Ernest Hemingway story of an older cafe employee and a younger cafe employee arguing over whether they should kick an old man out who'd spent way too much time there and bought too few things. What we hope to embody, and we kind of use that story as an inspiration for sort of our operations, is that everybody is deserving of that third place, of that clean, well-lighted place that is neither work nor home. And to embody that, you want to create an environment that is welcoming of all people, is considerate of their needs, is warm and just overall inviting. And the kicker being, if we can center that around the love of good coffee and the creation of something that we're really passionate about, it emboldens us to continue to do something that we love, and it also invites people to continue to see us. Community involvement is also an important component to what we do. We enjoy employing folks that have hobbies that are outside of the shop, whether it's artistry, music, whether it's community engagement in general. They volunteer with organizations that they're passionate about. We want to provide people the tools with which they can continue to do good for our community and increase the vibrancy of either the downtown and Rochester as a whole.
Yeah, I think that Cafe Steam kind of has a reputation for having people that either before, during, or after are doing or will do something cool.
Yeah.
So that's a cool thing to have.
We get to watch people grow. We've got Harvard graduates, we've got surgeons, we've got, world traveling musicians and world travelers in general. And so while we recognize that as a coffee shop, we may not be people's last stop, but we do want to try to be their favorite, or a place that they look back at least moderately fondly of. But yeah, it's it's cool to be in a position to actually have like, artistic influence and whatnot in such a small way. But we've seen now over time, other businesses cropping up doing similar work, and we couldn't be happier to be a part of a community that now is more interested in supporting that demographic. Whereas previously it felt like Rochester was somewhat of a vacuum for arts and culture, and maybe it existed and we just weren't familiar with it, or we were able to provide something back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do you have any outlooks on your future personally or for the businesses you're involved with?
Personally, I would love to travel more. There are parts of this business that I would like to fine tune just in my performance, but overall, developing the business so that it can be the best version of itself that it can be is just kind of a continued goal. People always ask, well, you should open a location in Northwest, or you should open a location. We try not to, personally, I try not to, think about any sort of empire or anything like that, but we will take on projects as they come to us and as they see as an opportunity. We try not to put coffee shops in any spaces that aren't asking for them already or are not needing them. If you have a space that needs a coffee shop to bring people in, that may not be the reason to add a coffee shop. You need a coffee shop because the area demands it, right? So it is just determining what that looks like, and as things come up, we'll address them and take on new projects if they come up.
I read the silliest article the other day that someone had written an article as to the effect of like the most frequent complaints about Rochester. And one of the things on the list was that there were too many coffee shops.
So I'll bite into that. There are too many drive-throughs. I could definitely get on that.
But they always do well. I've never seen a drive-through go down.
I think it is it feeds into sort of that reward center of everyone's brain, where it is the lowest obstacles possible. You get to stay in your car, wait in line, order through an intercom, and it's delivered to you. Okay. Sometimes they even have your credit card information on file so that you don't have to go through the process of handing someone your credit card. That is not something that we are hoping to contribute to, right? We want to contribute to environments that are promoting the exchange of ideas and creating spaces where you can meet other folks and feed off of the energy of working inside of a coffee shop and having a real conversation with somebody face to face. So I can definitely empathize with the complaint that there are too many coffee shops that are drive-throughs, but I think a city of our size is more than able to support independent coffee shops in an increasing amount. You can use other cities like Asheville, North Carolina. They've got twice as many coffee shops and half the amount of people, and they're all doing quite well. It's just about making them accessible in such a way that people can get to them, are motivated to get to them, and want to participate in the community at large. And sort of it is kind of the culture of Rochester is somewhat transient because nobody wants to make a huge investment because they may not be spending a lot of time in Rochester. But they know that once they do their 2-year stint or their residency, they'll be moving on to a cooler city like Chicago or Minneapolis. But one of my challenges there is that, if you can't be somebody in a small town, you are very unlikely to be somebody in a big town.
True.
So I would like to figure out how to be, well, maybe not be somebody in a small town, but contribute in a small town in such a way that it benefits it, and before thinking about anything bigger.
Absolutely. Well, as a last word, what would you say are some of the most important things that you've learned in owning and running a business, and what advice would you give to others?
I think for 99% of people, don't do it. Get out of it. Don't even try it, because it takes a lot of work.
You're off the podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. No, but truly, I mean, it takes far more energy than what you're anticipating. Everybody thinks that the building out the business is the hard part. Running the business is the hard part. Running the business is definitely a hard part. That the build out and the sort of concept phase that's all the fun part. Enjoy that while you can, and do it right the first time so that you don't have to fix things later on. Boy, I don't know how ethereal we want to get with these recommendations, but yeah, the other recommendation I would make is that if you are going to do it, just do it. Jump in head first, dedicate yourself to it, be willing to cancel on people or be willing to cancel on personal goals or set aside personal goals so that the overall health of the business can succeed, and it will reward you. But it's just hard to see it in those moments.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here, having this conversation. Thanks so much to Will for sharing his story. You can learn more about Cafe Steam and Colorway Coffee by checking out the links in our show notes. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you know an entrepreneur who would benefit from the conversation today, please share this podcast with them so they can benefit from the experience of other business owners in the community.